I had to find somebody to farm the Dempsey farm. So I called Keith Kirkdorfer because he and Jim had baled hay together as kids, and I knew him real well, and I called him, and he came out and he looked at the property and he said, I can't possibly do this, my equipment is way too big, you know. So he said, call Jeff Talbert. So I didn't know Jeff Talbert, but I called Jeff Talbert, and he came out and he got out of his truck, and he was this tall, lanky, good-looking guy with a big shock of hair, and he said, my equipment's too big to do this. He said, you know, I couldn't even get through your gate here. So he said, but I think I know somebody that might do it, and his name is Chris Rosselit. And I didn't know this so much later when I met his mom, Chris. It was his mom, Chris, when Jeff's mom, Chris. But she told me that Chris and Jeff had been friends since kindergarten. And I didn't know that. They went to school together, graduated together, didn't you? And so they're very, very close. So I called Chris, and he came out and he said, because Jeff Talbert told me he had smaller equipment than Jeff did. So he came out and he said yes, that he could do it. But I had to take down my gate and one of my posts so he could get his planter through there. So I did. I did do that. And he's been farming my property ever since, and he's absolutely wonderful, and he farms it for my two brother-in-laws. One died last year, but he farms the rest of it too. And it's not a lot of land, it's only like 50 acres, but he just does a fabulous job with it, taking care of it, using environmental products. And so he agreed to talk tonight, but he told me he'd never done anything like this before. Wanted to know how many people were going to be here, how long he had to talk, what he had to talk about. And he's a first-generation farmer, and he worked for Talbert's when he was young, and he milked cows for your husband, right? And he went to work after high school for the Cass County Road Commission, and then later he decided he'd like to go into farming, and he'd like to try you know, a couple fields and lease it and figure out how to do this. And he did it. He's been farming ever since. I think you farm around 800 acres, don't you? I mean, he's a small farmer by Cass County standards, because, you know, Kirkdorfer's maybe farm 8,000 acres. I don't know what Jeff farms, but a lot of land. So, but he loves to do it, and he's very good at it. So he's going to talk about the history of farming and how it's evolved even since he's been in it, and the kind of environmental practices he follows. And he tells me there's going to be a test. So, and I'm just glad that all you guys know him so that you can chuckle about this, because I don't know what the test is going to be, but obviously it will be a test. So anyway, Chris Rosselit.
Might want to walk around. Thank you for the introduction. I am a first-generation farmer. I bought my first tractor when I was 13 and started farming. And I can thank the Talberts for getting me started, because I used their equipment to get my first crops in. So, that was back in '68. If you open your folders there, kind of like a textbook. It's a timeline to start with. I'll try and get through the timeline. We'll get the stuff more interesting. But I'm going to start this thing with, what no-till is. It's planting a crop without doing any tillage. You just pull out your planter, drop it in the ground, and plant your seed. You planted whatever's there, okay? Conventional tillage is where you get out the plow and you invert the ground, level it back out and plant into it. Minimum tillage is where you may plow, but you leave at least 30% of the trash on the top of the ground. Ridge till, which is sometimes put in the category of no-till, is where you just till a slot and then plant into that slot. Sometimes you do it in the fall, sometimes you do it in the spring. And then no-till, like I said, you just drop the planter and rower. Okay, so on page 1, you can see the nice picture there, what it looked like in the 30s, the dust storms and stuff. Everybody was plowing, and when it got dry, and the wind blew, the dirt took off. I mean, took off until they saw it in DC. So during that time, the 30s, you know, we also had the Depression, and you know, and all the crops were failing too, so it was doubly bad. Where we farmed, we had some gullies in there, and I didn't know when they were put in, but Dean France, if anybody knew him, gave me the story. He says that they were gullies big enough that you could put a house in. He said it was all put in one night. You know, and I looked at it, and boy, it looked like right where the dead furrows were when they plowed it. That's where they were. And I thought and looked for years trying to figure out, why did they get a rain that big? The end of the Dust Bowl here in Michigan, we ended with a 10-inch rain in one night. And that's what did it. If you get 10 inches of rain, it moves a lot of stuff. And that's when these gullies were put in. And at this time here in the 30s, that's when your Soil Conservation Service started, where they started promoting conservation of our soils, of our prairies and everything else. On to page 2, at the end of the Dust Bowl, there's a book plan that was wrote, and it's called The Plowman's Folly. And what it did is it pretty much blamed the Dust Bowl days on the moldboard plow. We were inverting everything, there was nothing to hold the soil in place. And when them winds came up and it was so dry, it just took off. Also in that book, they promoted the idea of direct seeding or no-tilling. And that's about the first time you hear about it. So that was 43. And you notice in the timeline, I'm going to have some herbicides when they were first developed. One of the key things to make no-till work is herbicides, because if you're not tilling, you've got to kill your weeds somehow. And herbicides is what we use. There are other things, but they're just not as consistent. And if you want to grow a crop, you need consistency. In the bottom of that page 2, you see a planter. That's the first planter that was developed as a no-till planter. They built 50 of them, could only sell 23. So after a couple years, that ended real quick. On to 54, the year I was born. We finally had more tractors than we had horses. And you can see a couple more herbicides developed. And then you see that in 1962 there, that Harry Young, he's from Kentucky. And he's credited with the first commercial field of no-till in the U.S. A whole 7/10 of an acre. But here's the thing. He was brave enough to plant it out by the road where everybody could see it. Most of the time, when you try something new, you put it back 40 where only you and God know what it is. You know, if it don't go good, then, well, we forget it real quick. But this guy, he did it right out in the highway, so everybody saw it. So he's credited as the first one to commercially no-till. The first tiller, the planter that was really successful, if you see in the bottom of the page, there was one made by Alice Chalmers. And they made it bigger ones than that. But it had holders in the front to loosen up the ground so the planter could get the seed in the ground. You get later in the spring, and you know your soil dries out, and it gets harder and harder. You got to have some weight to get it in the ground. And that's what our early planters didn't have. You know, some of the really earliest planters were just adaptations from what we pulled with a horse. That first one was. So, I mean, they weren't built heavy. They were only meant to be in tillage. You need something a little more rugged when you start no-tilling. After you're no-tilling, then everything changes. Your soils change. Okay, if you noticed in the bottom there, 1968, that's when I planted my first crop. So I entered the timeline. All right, and then 1970, University of Missouri, they start a no-till continuous plot, corn on corn. And it's still running today. Back when Harry Young planted that crop in '62, there's another one that started. Ohio State started one, and that one is still going today. So '62 to 2022. So I mean, we're talking 60 years. They're still going. 74, 5.4 million acres. Not that many when you consider we've got 200 million acres. 76, Roundup's finally approved. 74, John Deere makes a no-till corn planter. You're looking at mine. That's my planter on that picture. And as you follow along, the acres grow. RTK is developed in 1992. Does anybody know what that is? It's real-time kinetics. It's what they needed to do sub-inch global positioning. You drive a tractor and then come back a year later and drive within an inch of what you just did a year ago. You can come back 5 years from now and do the same thing. You can download that program, you can plug it in another tractor, and it will do it. That's what RTK does for you.
He said, that's my kind of job.
Yeah. Well, and what goes along with it is auto steer. It drives to the end, and the old ones, they didn't tell you when it's the end, so you could run off into the bushes if you wanted to. Or the new ones will run to the end and they'll honk, and you know you got to turn. So you turn the wheel whichever direction you go, right or left, and hit another button, it finds the next AB line you call it, from A to B, but it sets out lines. In the field, it graphs the whole field, so you hit the button, it finds the next line, it turns and follows that line to the other end. You get the other end, you turn, hit the button, follows the line back to the other end. In the meantime, you watch TV. Play on your phone, yeah, you can do that too.
I thought you were working.
Yeah, I haven't got that in fact. I got it where it tells me where the line is, I haven't got it where it drives it. I bought a system, a cheap system once, and I clicked the thing and took off across the field and it turned left. It has a problem with trees and the signal, If the tree covers the satellite, it loses its way. So we scrapped that real quick. It was fun anyways. All right, we got you can see the acreage just keeps increasing. In fact, in 4 countries like South America, they are 75% no-till. They are mostly no-till. And a lot of that's double cropped. They get 2 crops off a year because they're closer to the equator, and and in the rainy season it grows good. If you're in the other part of the season, nothing grows. They got a dry and a wet season, and see, their wet season will start here next month, and it runs to end of May. So, but they are mostly no-till. And you can see one guy there, 2021. You see his yield? 602 bushels, no-till.
2021. Oh, right here.
So it does work. In fact, they got a thing here, it says in 2021, No-Till Corn Growers Associates, and they run a nationwide corn growing contest, state by state and then national compared. And the top 3 conventional irrigated yields were in the 380 bushel range. The top 3 no-till yields were 532 bushel. And the 602 isn't his highest one. But the highest one is a strip till. So, onward, the next page. This is what your test looks like.
That's what my brain looks like.
And I will give you a better picture when we get to it, okay?
Okay.
This one, I didn't realize it until we put it in here. It's got lines in it and you need it really clear because you're trying to see something. All right, you know, I hadn't even followed my notes. Where am I at? Okay, I had one of them events like I described to you in 37. In 1982, we got 7 inches in one night. And you probably remember that, Chris. All our valleys look like what?
Yeah.
Lakes.
Yeah.
Yikes, I had fields where we were doing some plowing, some no-tilling. One field I not plowed, it stripped the whole hillside down to the bottom of my chisel marks.
That's the year that Curtis Drive washed out too.
Yes, yes, yep, yep. So, I mean, we were struggling to replant fields. Some of them we had planted when it happened. We were struggling to replant because all that sediment, and it was just like driving in a quagmire. And it was feet deep. It took days for the water to go down in the valleys. And in the hillsides, like I said, there were some of them that were just stripped bare, no topsoil left. And then in the fall, combining, we dropped in some of them gullies. We took the ladder right off the combine. You know, and you couldn't see it coming because you never run in a standing crop. It was not fun. But I had one light bulb go off in that one. We had one farm we no-tilled, and it was very hilly. It was a poor farm, and I had no gullies. I had no washouts. I had no lakes. I had one grass waterway in it, and you could see where the water had run and laid the grass down. But other than that, the whole farm was untouched. One of them aha moments.
Yeah.
Maybe I should do more of this. It's not easy in the beginning because we didn't have a lot of herbicides that to control our weeds. And weeds and crops do not grow together very well. It's a major hit to your yields, right? So the struggle is always to keep it clean. And we learned as we went. And our equipment started to get better. Our first planters were light and erratic and getting the seed in the ground. And placement of the seed is critical, just like weed control is critical. I didn't know it when I started, but it takes years for no-till to start working like it should. Your bio-life, when you're plowing, you're working against it. Like a moldboard plow, you invert it. You bury all your trash. You incorporate air into it. And the air is like gas on a fire. It makes everything go faster, okay? And the thing all your biological life is tied to is carbon. That's your old plant material that's left in the soil. And when you put the air to it, it degrades faster. And your water holding capacities tied to it, your nutrient holding capacities tied to the carbon. And some of my sands, I didn't have much to start with. And it gets a little dry and it gets really ugly. What I didn't know was that it takes 4 to 6 years of no-till before it really starts working. You have to get your biological life working, your worms and stuff. I didn't have worms and sand. Worms usually don't like sand. And when you till them, they really don't survive very well. When I started no-tilling, I started seeing them. I didn't know your soils could have that. You know, I thought that was only for yards. But over time, your soil gains structure, it's life. Can I print one of these for you guys?
What?
Properties of less tillage, I don't, have I printed one? Yeah, I did. Hand it off.
Oh, you have something else to tap on.
Yep, this is not the test yet.
I think I'm gonna have to make the rest of it that way.
Okay, and the idea is the longer you no-till, the more the process works. Soil gains structure as you no-till. It's a system in itself. Soil life makes the soil crumbly by the microorganisms. They cement the soil particles together and they take a crumble shape. If you ever dug in your yard and rolled it up, you know it's not like powder. It's like crumbles. And that's what your biolife does to your soils. Okay? And without the biolife, all that breaks down and then it gets like flour. It doesn't have a structure. Okay? So it resists compaction because of that structure. It's like comparing sand in a box compared to a cement block. You can put weight on a cement block, but it doesn't take away your pore spaces. If you don't have structure, it's like standing on sand. You just compact it. Okay? Okay, the structure also resists crusting. You know, your soil's on top. You know, sometimes it rains on it and it gets that crust on top. And when it doesn't have structure, you get that crust and it's hard to get your seeds up. Your water won't soak in and it runs off. So if you got the structure, then it's got pore space to it. And the water goes in and it stays, the ground stays softer. You know, it breathes. So, like I said, organic matter is higher in no-till because when you plow it, you put air in and you burn it. It increases the loss of organic matter. And the idea would be to build it. So many things are tied to your organic matter in your soil. Your ability to build fertility, everything's tied to the carbon. Your water is tied to the carbon. If you can double the organic matter, which is the carbon, measure your carbon in the soil, you can double your water holding capacity. So it makes a big difference. Different soils have different equilibriums. You'll reach a point where you can't get any higher. But there are soils, you've heard of muck soils? These soils are 20+% organic matter. We had an outfit in Princeton, Illinois, that built some of our fertilizer. We used the biological stuff, and they were the first ones to do it back in '88. So, we sent in a soil sample, and they seen that there, and said, well, what's that stuff? They never seen that in Illinois. They didn't know what it was. But the muck is formed on the bottom of a lake, an ancient lake. You know, or it was like a swamp. You know, the stuff would grow, it'd die, and it'd go in the water, and because it was underwater, it wouldn't decay. It wouldn't be burned up. It just kept piling up in there. And that's when you get these deep muck soils. Because they were underwater, they did not degenerate. They preserved it. And then when they drained the swamps, there was this high peat or high carbon soil. So that's where they came from. Erosion control. With no-till, you've got more trash on top. You know, when the rain falls, it hits the trash. If your soil is bare, what the rain does, it hits the soil, it breaks the soil particle loose, and then it flows with the water. That's what erosion is. If your soil is bare, to where the rain can hit it, that when that rain hits it, it's moving your soil. Let's see. And then also your no-till is more porous, so it will soak it in quicker than a soil that has crusted. And the last one, that's my favorite. That is my favorite. No more picking rocks. I was so good at it, I know. No more picking rocks. When we're plowing, you're rolling them up, and you get to pick more. Every time you go through the tillage equipment, you're rolling more rocks up. You get to, and we got some rocky soils. I mean, we got some as big as cars around here. But this is working good. I said after a while, I'm actually burying them. We keep putting more trash on top of it. We actually bury them. That's great. So, onward. So the longer you no-till, the better it works. The more your biological life works, the more your soil structure improves. You know, you've got worms, you've got bacteria, you've got fungi, you've got actinomyces. They all have their job. You know, bacteria break stuff down. Your worms are your tillage. They go feet into the ground. And they're your tillage, and they also make that hole that the water runs down. It makes the hole that your roots go down. And what they also do is they fertilize your crop. They're probably the only things that get dirtier than I do. Because they eat dirt all the time. I'm just a part-timer. A worm actually eats the soil, it eats the biological matter, it digests it, and it how do you say that nice?
Fertilizer.
It excretes it, that's it. And when it comes out, it has converted the nutrients in it into an available form for your plants. So,
That's
they're...
why they call worm castings.
It is, absolutely, yep. And our test has something to do with that. Well, the thing about worms though, they don't like their homes disrupted. And when we were plowing and sand, they were crazy about sand anyways, and when we plowed, it was really hard for them to survive. All right. I think we can start that. I have a picture in your folder, but it has lines in it. You really need to see it clearly, so I've reprinted it.
Oh, another pass?
Yes, another pass out.
Oh,
Yeah. This is the one that will be tested on. It's the same picture, but it doesn't have the lines in it. You need to see it. You want to
Here, I'll pass it. I'll pass it. You don't need one, right? You won't need one. Here, you need one? Yes. Okay. Okay. That does.
Is it the new one? Yours does too, the new one?
I think we got two. Give Sandy one. Here.
Get one that does, did I must have got a bad one.
Oh, I dropped that.
I don't know if
That's
it's
all right,
what
you're
it
on
is.
it. I got it.
Top up there.
Just give me four. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the same picture, it just doesn't have the lines in it. 2.
Yeah, not me.
Barbara, 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. 3, 4. Yeah. And 1 for you. And another one.
Did you get one here? There's two here. There's two here.
Oh, you want that?
Do you use the corn that is Roundup resistant or no issue resistant?
At this time, the question was, do I use the corn that's Roundup resistant? I have. At this moment, I do not. It's like an extra $100 a bag.
Why?
So- I've been able to control my weeds without having to use it.
You can,
Yes, I have been. Not to say that it always will be, because
not
it
chemically,
seems like a new weed is always trying to figure a way into my field.
not chemically, you're not going, you're putting any chemicals on it.
Oh, I do put weed killers. Oh, absolutely I do. Yeah, but just not that one.
It's just not Roundup.
I do use Roundup, but before my crop's up. Roundup Ready Corn, for those who don't know what it is, they insert a gene into corn where Roundup will not kill it, where normally Roundup will kill anything green and growing. It translates through the plant
Except
and will kill the roots too. That's why it works so good. And that's why it made it so we could no-till, really. It's what it is. But all weed killers in one form or another does the same thing. Some kills just the top, some disrupt the cells. Roundup just disrupts the process in the plant to where it can't function anymore.
Roundup killed a big pine tree in Jeff's.
You can?
He said that it somehow, something went through and it sprayed on that pine tree. The big pines along
It has
the
to
side.
get into the
And it-
plant
And he said he
cell.
rinsed it and everything, and he said it killed that big pine tree.
It's possible. If it gets into the flow of the sap into the plant, it can. But it usually takes a lot to kill a tree.
I would think that he said he had to kill that big pine tree. He just told me that yesterday.
Okay, yeah, that could be, yep. That's why you're careful when you use that stuff. You don't want to put it on something you don't want to kill.
Kill people too.
Yeah. And you wanna wear gloves.
But anyways, you're looking at a photo of my cornfield a couple days ago.
Couple weeks ago?
Couple days ago.
Couple days ago.
Yep, I took that picture in a cornfield right by my house. Do you see the worm middens?
See the what?
The middens. The middens is when a worm has a hole in the ground, he has a cover on his hole. He piles trash on top of his hole to protect his hole and to keep it cool, and his excrement comes out there too. You ever noticed if you take and scrape a piece of ground, and then you'll start seeing these piles of dirt coming out? That's where the wormhole is, and that's his excrement. So, this is his dung pile.
fertilizer.
Do you see them? How many are there? Let me help you a little bit. Go to the next page. All right, we're down on the ground. Let's see, which one? We're at this one. Do you see the circle? That is, we are down about 6 inches away from a midden, and that's what his house looks like. You usually can find them by watching to see the straw that's crossed. You know, if they pile it on top. You see it?
How does a worm do that?
So your test is to tell me how many middens in that previous page there is. There's all kinds. There's all kinds. There's the night crawlers that you know for fishing and stuff. There's microscopic worms. There's good ones, there's bad ones. There's some that eat the crop. They eat on the roots. Yes, it is.
Oh, gee.
Well, see, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. See it? Oh, did you cheat? You cheated. Go to the next page. It'll show you how many middens were there. And that is not all of them. All the things that were going on you didn't know. There are more. I didn't even touch the bottom of the page really. So did you pass your test?
No. Well, I did find a couple.
Yeah, you found a couple I'll pass you. I grade easy. Except for Ed. He had to get all of them. He's my math teacher, so I grade hard on him. Yeah. All right. I got another story for you. I went to a class once when I first started no-tilling, and they were telling me that worms grab trash and pull it down in their holes.
Worms?
Yeah, worms will grab trash and pull it down in their holes, and they'll digest it, you know. I thought, you're pulling my leg. That can't be. What are they going to grab it with? Their toes? Look at your picture. There's a green leaf in the bottom left corner. What's it pointing at? It's pointing right at a midden.
Oh,
Go in the upper right corner. There's another leaf. That one's dead. What's it pointing at?
a mitten.
A midden. They actually do that. They drag them down the hole.
Oh,
I thought, well, they were full of it. They had brown eyes and the whole thing, you know? Well, truth be told, they actually do that. And
Probably not overnight, but.
no, they don't overnight. But I mean, that's what they do. They will grab trash, pull it down their hole, and they will consume it.
Yeah.
They wrap their body around it?
I got no idea how they do it. I don't stay up that late.
well, that's your
Oh, boy. So, I'm kind of biased that this thing works. I've done it for, oh gosh, well, since 80 something, so I'm almost 40 years in it.
40 years?
Well, like 40 years I started playing with it. We've been all no-till for at least the last 20 years. I think it works. I'd be able to build some nutrient levels I never could before when I was plowing.
Strength of the crop. Dirt.
I'm not saying that no-till is the only way to farm, because it isn't. You got to fit your own situation. You look at people that are doing seed corn or doing green beans. There's a reason they till. They are on a schedule. When they plant that green bean, every green bean needs to germinate at the same time, so that each plant is all the same size and at the same stage when it comes to harvest, and all the beans on that plant are ripe the same. It's consistency, you know. If it isn't consistent, they don't have a product. Same way with seed corn. They're planting female rows. You'll see 4 rows standing. The ones they take the tops off, that's the females. And then you see 1 or 2 rows in between. That's your male rows. Well, they plant the female once, and then they wait so many days, and they plant the male. The reason is they're 2 different maturities, and they're trying to make the male tassel at the same time the female's pushing the silks. So that's why they do that. So they do tillage because they need consistency. And when you got a bare soil, things are more consistent than when you've got a soil that's covered with trash. You can uncover it, but I mean, you're still playing games. If the wind blows, your row's covered, there goes your consistency. There's a reason they do it. But there's different ways to do different things. So it works for me. I've got some erosive soils. I got some hilly fields. I like to keep my soil in place. It took years. That one I stripped off, it was years before that produced. It's back working again. But, I don't like going backwards. I want to go forwards. Let's see, what else did I have in there? think I had some, oh, okay, page 8. Yep, John Madden line, right down the middle of that picture. One side, this is a no-till, corn-on-corn plot at Beck's Seed Company down in Atlanta, Indiana. This has been a no-till corn for over 20 years. One side has been tilled, the other side is no-till. Can you guess which is which? It's a loaded question, I'll tell you. The left is no-till. If you turn the page, they tell you. My page is upside down, I hope yours isn't. As you can see, the no-till looks a lot nicer, doesn't it? I'll tell you the reason why. The conventional on the right, they did tillage and they plowed it. And then you got a heavy rain. You see the light spot up in the left corner and on top and bottom? It crusted. And then it turned dry, you know, and they didn't have the roots. So it's the tough conditions is where it shows. I got another deal last year, their plot a year ago. Let me get it right. We'll go to the last page here. That's a scorecard over 20 years. And there's only a couple bushel difference over 20 years. What it doesn't tell you is that no-till was way behind in the beginning. And last year it was 14 bushel ahead of tilled ground. You remember me saying it works better the longer you do it?
Right.
That's the thing. It's a long haul thing. It's not something you jump in and out of. One tillage pass, it starts destroying, which it took years to do.
What are you doing environmental?
Environmentally,
Yeah, I
Yes.
know you've told me some of the things you've been doing to help the soil.
well, we do cover crops once in a while. If we get a field that seems biologically dead, you know, we'll try and feed the microbes. We're doing that. I'm not good at cover crops, I'll tell you that. I'm better at killing weeds. I'm sorry. But there are places for that, and it makes a big difference when it works. Biologically, my fertilizers got biologicals in them. These microbes that are in the soil, they're in my fertilizer too. So I'm re-inoculating the soil with my microbes all the time. You know, I've got a lot of micronutrients in my fertilizers and
You
stuff.
do a lot of soil testing, don't you?
All my fields are tested every other year. Every other year. So, you know, I can kind of follow. Like your organic matters, 1.3. We were under 1 when we started. We're getting up to a point where it doesn't go much higher. Each soil will find an equilibrium. There's a agronomist in Illinois. He was checking this, and there's a field right next to a graveyard. 116 years, you know, graveyard's never been plowed. Right?
Let's hold.
Well, you can find a grave 116 years old, how's that? And then they had a field right next to it, it had been tilled all 116 years. They were within 1/10 of each other, organic matter-wise. So there's an equilibrium they will get to. And, you know, they've done cover crops and everything else on that one, and they couldn't raise it beyond a point. So, but you can sure take it down.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
You use a lot of irrigation?
I'm about 1/3 irrigated. Yep. We shut her down tonight so I can be here. Yep. No problem. It's I'm caught up. Yeah, it makes a big difference. I like to stay there because everything's always green.
Especially on our sands.
Yeah, there's sandy soils and the sandy hillsides, they just love their water.
Any questions, more questions? Anybody have any other questions?
You gotta do vegetables again?
No, I got a labor problem. No, really, truthfully, that was my shortcoming, and vegetables are labor intensive. And if you don't have the people there when they're ready, you haven't got anything. You've got just a lot of expense. I mean, vegetables aren't like a corn crop. You can wait a month and harvest it later. Vegetables, the day it's ready, you gotta be ready. You gotta have a market, a place for it too. So it's a different animal than grain production. We used to grow cauliflower.
Yes, we know.
I'm talking to the people that don't know. We had over 5 acres of cauliflower. We had some 5-pound heads even. Yeah. It grew really well. We had broccoli, we had some Brussels sprouts, some cabbage. Never could grow enough broccoli. It just,
The whole field full of watermelons just down the road.
yep. That's a lot of money there, really. There's a gross of like $18,000 an acre.
And tomatoes too, they grow tomatoes.
Yes.
Right now, that's.
They're a lot of money. But the same thing, if they don't want your product, it's worthless. It often happens with tomato, they have you overplant, they'll take part of your production, and when they're done, you're stuck with what's left. That's just the way vegetable production works. You always overproduce. You've seen fields of vegetables and they're just rotten in the field. They got what they could sell, and what's left, and you don't have a market, it's just wasted, really. I mean, but that's the way it works. You can grow more than you can eat, I guess. But it's good that we can get what we want to eat, as much as we want to eat. We're really blessed in this country. We haven't known hunger like they did in Europe in the wars. I mean, they went hungry for years.
Have you seen a lot of farmers with the cost of increase going on, leave their fields empty, or, because we're noticing a lot of fields have not been plowed or, tilled at all.
Where's this at?
Oh, up in Decatur Road, there's a couple places, the last couple of weeks they've done something, but we go by, and I don't know whose farms they are, obviously, but,
Were they in wheat?
they were corn last year, so, a couple of them.
Okay.
Some of them they did finally put corn into, but there are still some sitting, with no crop on it, or appears no crop.
Yeah, each one's got their own story. You know, it could be bought for development.
Oh, okay.
We have solar farms going up here by Edwards for Cass. There's 1,000 acres going into solar farms.
Maybe that's it.
You could have an estate deal. Somebody could have died, and it just hasn't continued. You know. There's CRP. There's increased acres of CRP right now too. They're enrolling more acres into it, so you have to. Each one is a different case.
Yeah, thought about the gallon of solar.
Yeah, and maybe they wanted too much rent. Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's
Any more questions? Thanks, Chris. Yeah, this has been really entertaining.
Never had it done before. I mean, that's incredible.
teaching Sunday school. I can do that.
Yeah. Chris is the sexton of the Smith Chapel Cemetery, right?
I was the sexton.
Excellent sexton.
I'm the VP.
You're, okay, he's the VP. Chris actually had a career before, while he was farming part-time, he worked for the Michigan Department of Transportation, and he was in maintenance out of the Niles office, right?
Yes.
I think you probably drove those big wing plows, didn't you, in the winter? Yeah. And he retired from MDOT, and so now he can just farm, right?
Yep.
Yeah, just farm.
Not just
Just,
working.
yeah, an avocation.
I'll be far.
He had a profession and then he had an avocation, so. Avocation. Something you just love to do.
Okay.
Yeah. We have goodies in the, who brought the goodies?
Eleanor.
Eleanor brought the goodies. We have cookies and something to drink, right?
Rice and lemonade.
Cookies and lemonade in the other room. Anybody wants to talk to Chris? Why, He'll be more and tell you all about the worms that you wanna know.
Thanks.
Write a book on it, worms and me.